As I've said before in a previous video where I believe I used the word enthusiast quite a few times, the mid-range market is a really exciting market because these are capable cameras that, although are expensive, are not in the realm of the flagship pro bodies. And Sony really kicked things off with the a7 IV. That was a fantastic camera, but it has been out now for a long time. And in that time, we've seen the other competitors make some really compelling cameras. The Nikon Z6 III with its partially stacked sensor was fantastic. The Panasonic S1 II, one of our favorite video cameras to date. And then recently the Canon EOS R6 Mark III, which might be the most all-rounded camera that we have ever seen in this range. But now look at this, I got a Sony a7 V, and this might be the new most well-rounded camera on the market, possibly taking the crown away from the EOS R6 Mark III. We're going to find that out today. I'm Chris Niccolls. This is PetaPixel. Let's answer that question. So of course, when you're reviewing a camera, the first thing you want to do is put some new memory into that. And when I look at these and I see the slots for memory cards, I notice the same configuration as the Sony a7 IV. Sony's one of the only companies to use CFexpress Type A cards, and they've got one hybrid slot, so it'll take CFexpress Type A or SD slots, and then they have a second backup slot, which is just SD. Now I want the best performance possible to test the buffer, so I'm going to use CFexpress Type A cards today, and I'm going to go to my trusty OWC cards. And I really like how they have both the Atlas Pro cards, which are more affordable but still very fast card, easy to see because you can always tell it from the blue label, and then they have their Atlas Ultra cards, their purple label cards, and these things are the fastest around. So I love that they're reliable. I've got different speeds and different price points. And SD cards, of course, are very easy to find card readers for, but CFexpress Type A is a little bit difficult because it's a more rare card type. So there's a really handy interface that I love. Because I use every single card out there, I can use the OWC CFexpress Type B card reader with the supplied adapter that comes with their CFexpress Type A cards. And this way I can easily connect that into the same reader. I don't have to shovel around for a separate reader altogether. And then use their Energize software. This is a great program that lets you check the health of your cards or format them completely to make sure that nothing's left behind. I really rely on that all the time. Go check out OWC cards, click the link in the description below. Let's get on with the rest of the handling here. So in terms of handling, it has been a while since the a7 IV came out, but Sony's not really the company to innovate the body design of their cameras in major ways. I mean, this basically looks and acts and feels a lot like the a7 IV. The control layout is basically identical, which is to say very familiar, that classic Sony utilitarian boxy kind of look. We do get the same autofocusing joystick, the same dual control knobs on the back, mode dial, nothing up here on the top left, but there are some notable changes to the back of the camera. So Sony's decided to go with a 3.69 million EVF, which is not terrible, but actually got a little bit on the low side now when we look at these mid-range cameras. Some of them are rocking 5.76 million EVFs, but I do like that we have a big improvement to the back panel because this has the same display that we would get on something like the very advanced A7R5. So not only does it go just over 2 million dots of resolution, it also does give us that excellent full articulation that we love. I mean, Sony does a great job with the design of this. It should please almost everybody. They also have an interesting feature now. In low light situations, this screen can actually automatically dim to be more efficient, drop the backlight down where you don't need it and save a little bit of battery life. So the only other notable change we have to the structure of the camera is actually right beside that articulating screen. We now have twin USB-C ports here. We got rid of that micro USB, which is great. So we have one that's now dedicated to power delivery, camera charging, and then we have a faster transfer USB-C here, which is great for when you want to download stuff or connect to things, or do stuff like your webcam interface. Otherwise, the a7 V is showing how versatile it is with full ports here, full-size HDMI, which we had before. We got mic jack and we have headphone jack, so that's nice to see. We also have the same Z-type battery that you've had before. And again, we like these batteries. They deliver a lot of life. They've been around in the Sony ecosystem for a while now, but this does also have a brand new processor. This is now using a Bionz XR2 processor. We're going to talk about that quite a bit today, but one of the major benefits is better battery life out of this Z-type battery. So I'm going to get roughly between 600 to 700 CP-rated shots, depending on whether I'm using the EVF or the back panel, but that's like a 20% improvement from what we had before on the a7 IV. But look, we got to talk about the brand new sensor because this is now using a partially stacked chip, 33 megapixels. So What's nice about this is we're seeing a resolution bump over the Z6 III, which also uses a partially stacked sensor, a resolution bump over the Panasonic S1 II, which also uses a partially stacked sensor, and it gets us on par with the Canon EOS R6 Mark III's 33 megapixel chip. But that's not a partially stacked sensor. So now what we're getting is a powerful combination of resolution as well as fast scan speeds on this sensor. This reads out at just over 12 milliseconds. So this is actually, for context, going to be slightly faster than the Nikon Z6 III. And remember, we're getting quite a bit more resolution above that 24 megapixel sensor. This is also going to be a faster scan speed than the Panasonic S1 II, and definitely faster than the Canon EOS R6 Mark III with its non-partially stacked sensor. But let me just say that all four of these cameras do have still pretty fast scan rates. If you want to use electronic shutter on these cameras, it's still quite usable, but you will get varying levels of rolling shutter, and this should have the least amount of it. So that's really nice when you want to do faster bursts for sports and action, and that's actually one of the big improvements over the Sony a7 IV. See, this new fast scanning sensor is going to lock some nice quick electronic burst rates, which we've seen on the competition, but which the a7 IV was absolutely lacking. The a7 IV could shoot 10 frames per second mechanical shutter mode, although not with lossless compressed. This also can shoot 10 frames per second mechanical mode with lossless compressed files, but it can now shoot also 30 frames per second in electronic shutter mode, and again, with very minimal rolling shutter. This also unlocks a lot of other features which you take for granted on a lot of the other cameras, things like pre-capture, for example. And I also like that I've got the Sony boost mode. This is where I can customize a button, and with a press or a hold, I can just quickly switch it to 30 frames per second or 20 frames per second, whatever I desire, to get those quick bursts when I need them, and then let go or turn off the toggle when I want to go back to mechanical shutter. Just makes everything nice and quick. This is also going to lock a lot of benefits for video record modes, as well as have some ramifications when it comes to image quality, and I absolutely want to discuss those just in a bit. But before we do that, let's talk about this new processor, more of the benefits that offers. You know, it's funny, I just spent a week in beautiful, warm Costa Rica, neotropical Costa Rica, shooting macaws and shooting all sorts of tanagers and stuff. And now we find ourselves back in cold Calgary, snow everywhere, getting some well-trained chickadees on camera here. But it does give us an opportunity to test the buffer on this. So Sony is saying, I mean, you've got a pretty decent buffer here. When you're shooting RAW, you can shoot just under 100 RAW files in a row, but that's with a lossy compressed format. And you're going to lose some image quality there. I really do want to shoot lossless compressed. I'm trying to get the best image quality possible. So if I'm shooting RAW in a row, lossless compressed, I feel that number is more important. I'm getting about 50 shots in a row. At 20 frames per second, that burns through in, 2.5 seconds. It's pretty fast, but at least I do have a number there for what I can shoot if I want maximum raw image quality. Now, if I go to JPEG, well, it extends quite a bit further. See, if I want to maximize my burst rate, 30 frames per second, shooting JPEG only, I can get about 200 shots before the buffer slows down. So that does give me that extension. And if I'm willing to go down to 10 frames per second, whether mechanical or electronic, well, then I can basically just shoot and shoot and shoot. Doesn't matter if it's JPEG or RAW, it will just handle that throughput and keep going. So 10 frames per second is not bad. I'd prefer to shoot mechanical shutter for most of my situations, but if I want to do pre-capture to get the birds or really get that faster buffer rate, well, now you know the numbers. So of course, we have all these chickadees coming around here. I'm shooting fast electronic shutter to try to capture the movement. And of course, we take this for granted in today's world, but now we get electronic shutter with no blackout. 30 frames per second even, I can shoot without blackout, which is really nice if I want to follow movement, just keep my eye on the composition and follow these small birds as they flutter around. So, for sports and action, we've got decent buffer, we've got fast autofocus capabilities, and I think this camera is actually going to work very well for the kind of stuff that we're doing right now. So while Jordan relies on his IBIS to make this shot look steady, why don't I talk about the IBIS on the Sony a7 IV? Because of how much time has passed, so many cameras have surpassed what the a7 IV could do. 5.5 stops was the IBIS there, but now we're getting 7.5 stops here in this center on the a7 V. So this brings it largely in line with its contemporaries. So this new Sony Bionz XR2 processor, this is a brand new system that you will not find in any of the other Sony bodies right now. And we've seen where they've put AI processing units onto the chip for things like autofocus, like on the a7R5, for example. Well, this goes beyond that. I mean, this is an integrated unit now. The AI processing goes beyond just autofocus. It goes into things like AI-based white balance control for more accurate white balancing. But when it does come to autofocusing performance, we are getting some benefits here because, again, a lot has changed since the a7 IV. So now we're going to get all the subject detection modes well beyond just real-time tracking and face and eye detect. We're now going to get get things like birds, of course, animals, insects, automobiles, trains, planes, all that kind of stuff, as well as the enhanced human detection that we've seen on a lot of the Sony bodies. So things like face, eye, limbs, bodies, torso focusing, all this kind of stuff. And it also goes beyond that now. It can actually do things like track a person's face, and then if it loses that face, predict where they should go based on the motion, and then acquire that very quickly as well. And something we've seen in a lot of other contemporary cameras, the Sony a7 IV can now automatically choose between the right subject detection mode for the right situation. I'm still finding that to be a little bit unreliable. I find I still get better results if I specifically choose the right subject detection mode. But overall, this is a really easy to use, very fast focusing and reliable camera. And when you combine that with the fact that we now have a fast scanning sensor that only helps that, I would say that below the absolute premium pro bodies that they offer, this is really the fastest focusing Sony I've used so far. But a well-rounded camera isn't just photography, it has to do good video as well. So let's go to Jordan next, and he's gonna talk about that. But before we do that, listen to this. So we talk about this range of cameras, the Z6 III, the EOS R6 Mark III, the Panasonic S1 II, and now the Sony a7 V. These cameras are getting more and more expensive, unfortunately. So let me suggest an alternative option that might help you guys out. BH Photo is going to carry all of these cameras, and if you're looking to get this as a gift for somebody at the holiday season or for yourself, this might really help you out. Consider getting a BH Photo Payboo credit card because it gives you a couple ways to really make it easier. First off, if you want, you can just get a lower price because you can save the sales tax. Basically, you buy the camera with the Payboo credit card and then B&H Photo will pay you back the sales tax. That can help out a lot. Or there's another alternative. You don't save the sales tax, but maybe you want to spread your payments out over a longer term. Well, the BH Photo Payboo credit card gives you the option to do some financing, either 6 months or even 12 months. And this can be a really handy way to just spread the cost out over the year. Now, again, remember, this is just a suggestion. Credit cards are subject to approval. And again, you want to be responsible with your purchases here, but it could really help you out at the holiday season. Of course, terms do apply, and you can get the info that you need at bhphoto.com/Payboo. Payboo credit card accounts are issued by Comenity Capital Bank.
All right, it's Jordan here to talk about the video capabilities on the Sony a7 V, which is filming me right now. And the previous camera, the a7 IV, was a fantastic photo camera for the price, but it was a bit of a disappointing video camera because of the slow readout on that 33 megapixel sensor. So before, we were capped at 4K 60p for our maximum frame rate, but it required an APS-C crop. With the new camera now, we can record 4K 60p full width. As well, we can now do 4K 120p with an APS-C crop. Importantly, all these 4K modes are now much more usable than what we saw in the a7 IV because of the much faster partially stacked sensor in the a7 V. This thing reads out nearly 3 times as fast as the a7 IV. We're getting around 10 millisecond readout, which means you're not going to run into a lot of rolling shutter artifacts in your video. The other really nice thing with this is it gives us very similar readout to the more video-focused a7S III or FX3, but we still get that 33 megapixels of resolution for taking photos. There is one odd omission with the a7 V, and that's that while in its 4K modes, it's using the full 7K resolution of this sensor, there's no way to actually record this in full resolution mode. As well, even though this sensor is fast enough that it should be able to record a 3:2 aspect ratio open gate signal using that whole sensor, that's also not an option on this. And it's really disappointing compared to its competition because you've got the Nikon Z6 III, Panasonic S1 II giving you the ability to record 6K and the brand new Canon R6 III that gives you the ability to record 7K. And both the Canon and Panasonic offer open gate recording. This is a real drawback to the Sony. As well, all 3 of those competing models give you the ability to record internal RAW video. You can't do that with the a7 V, and it doesn't even have the ability to record RAW video using an external recorder. I was a little confused when I first fired up the a7 V and went to record 4K 60p because I was actually seeing a bit of a crop factor in that mode. But that's because there's a new option in the menus, and this is the 4K field of view priority. And what this is going to do is let you record 4K 60 using the full width of the sensor, and if you go to 4K 120, it'll let you use the Super 35 APS-C region. If you don't have this feature enabled, it will apply a small crop in both of those modes. Well, what's the trade-off here? Well, if you turn this mode on, you will no longer get noise reduction when you're recording 4K 60p full width or 4K 120p at the Super 35 region. So honestly, it might be worth just leaving this feature off and recording with a small crop if you're not planning to apply some noise reduction in post, because the shadows do get noticeably more noisy when this setting is enabled. I should also mention, even though Sony doesn't advertise it, this is a dual native ISO sensor, with the two native sensitivities in S-Log3 being 800 and 8000 ISO. One area where recent Sony cameras have really excelled is in the video autofocus, but it's worth pointing out the previous A7 IV was actually one of the last Sony cameras released without the dedicated AI processing chip, which gives you vastly improved video autofocus. Now they've rectified that with the A7 V, and I've just found the autofocus performance on it to be incredibly accurate and sticky. And one thing I really like with Sony cameras is I find you don't have to go into the menus and really tailor how the video autofocus is going to perform in terms of responsiveness and things. Just initiate tracking on your subject and the autofocus is going to be extremely accurate, but also nice and natural looking. I just love the look of Sony's video autofocus. One area Sony still struggles is in the IBIS performance when recording video. So right now, I'm just using steady shot, no digital stabilization applied to it. And even with the improved IBIS on this, you can see there's still quite a bit of bounciness in the frame. So now I've switched over to active stabilization, which does definitely crop into the image a little bit, but you can see it smooths the footage out. But remember, anytime you crop, you're dropping your video quality. So now I've switched over to dynamic active stabilization, this newer mode, which does give you very stable footage, but again, with a hefty crop factor in it. And the real downside here is if you're using slower shutter speeds, like I tend to when I'm shooting 24p, you'll just get the odd blurry frame, and the camera can't compensate for that. So it still winds up looking a little bit weird. I would still say Panasonic is the gold standard if you're looking at full frame IBIS video performance. Now with such a small body, very impressive video record modes, and no fan, I was a little concerned about the thermal performance on the A7 V, and I shouldn't have been, because it is excellent. Doing my standard tests indoors at room temperature, I was able to record 4K 60p full width, 4K 120p, 4K 24p, all the way until the battery died, which was generally around 2 hours of record time. I even tried cranking up the data rates, shooting 4K 60p at 600 megabits per second, and again, I got very close to the 2-hour record time before the battery died, not the camera overheating. Now, I can't say how this is going to perform in very hot environments or direct sunlight, because I'm in Canada, but in more controlled indoor environments, I don't think overheating is going to be a problem at all. Look, when I first saw the specs for the A7 V, sure, I was a little disappointed that we didn't have a high-resolution video record mode or open gate, but the majority of people are going to use this as a 4K camera, and in that regard, it really does excel. We've got excellent autofocus, a very fast-reading sensor, very nice ergonomics, and very detailed 4K footage that's going to make a lot of people happy. I think the Sony A7 III was a really popular hybrid camera for a lot of people, but the A7 IV kind of let that go a little bit. It was a better photo camera than a video camera. I think the A7 V rectifies this. This is an incredibly capable video camera, and it's wonderful for stills as well.
Okay, so Jordan's had a chance to talk about video, and I've had a few days now to be able to look at the files, and now I can talk about image quality and give you my final conclusions here. So the first thing we want to talk about is, are we seeing an improvement in dynamic range? Well, I want to give you guys some context here. I mean, with cameras like the Nikon Z6 III, when they moved to a partially stacked sensor, we did not see an improvement in dynamic range at all. But with the Panasonic S1 II, which also uses a partially stacked sensor, we did see an improvement. And what we've figured out since then is that camera is basically using a dual gain sensor, and it's exposing for both of those dual gain ISOs, and then it's combining those photos together to enhance the dynamic range. It looks like here on the Sony A7 V, it's doing a similar thing. Now the dual gain on this sensor is 100 base ISO, and then 1000 ISO is our next step up. It's a fairly big spread, and that does mean that if you are going to shoot higher ISOs, you generally want to get to at least 1000 ISO. That will actually give you marked improvement when shooting at those high ISOs. Regardless, compared to the A7 IV, you guys can see that there is a difference in dynamic range and just detail in low light situations at similar exposures. The A7 V is going to give us cleaner results in those shadows, and if we boost from there, we're just going to get the benefits of that extra detail and that less noise. So definitely an improvement there. But I do also want to point this out. You know, the Nikon Z6 III, we were getting the same dynamic range in mechanical shutter versus electronic shutter. They were choosing to just kind of keep parity there. But with the Panasonic, now the A7 IV, we're doing those tests with mechanical shutter because on those cameras, there is a benefit to dynamic range shooting a mechanical shutter. Here, if I then go to electronic shutter and shoot to get like the faster burst rates or pre-capture, for example, I am going to take a bit of a DR hit. As you can see here, we are getting less detail and more noise when shooting electronic shutter. I think we're still spoiled nowadays. We got to keep in context that regardless, all of these modern cameras are giving us fantastic dynamic range no matter what shutter we're using. But if you want to get the best detail out of this, it is best when possible to shoot the mechanical shutter mode. The other thing I want to say about this is keep in mind that the A7 IV is giving us this benefit at 33 megapixels versus 24 megapixels. The Canon EOS R6 Mark III, well, this also shoots around the same resolution, but it does not have a partially stacked sensor. How do those all compare to each other? Well, that's a video for another time, and I think that's going to be quite interesting. Once we get full RAW support and we can really test all of these cameras at parity with each other, I think that's going to be a very interesting conclusion to find out. So this has been a very interesting camera to review. You know, recently I reviewed the Canon EOS R6 Mark III, and it turned out to be a fantastic, incredibly well-rounded jack-of-all-trades camera. I mean, it could do everything. Decent resolution, great photos, great autofocus, great hybrid video camera. And so I would say that's the most well-rounded camera I've played with all year until this came out. I mean, you know, just to give it context, like the A7 IV, it certainly pushed more photo than it did video. I wouldn't call it a true hybrid, whereas the A7 III before it was fantastic, as Jordan pointed out. But this now comes back to being a fantastic video and photo hybrid camera, and it's incredibly well-rounded. I love the EOS R6 III, I love the handling of it, the body design, but this also does have fantastic handling and body design because I'm used to the Sony platform, and I think it's a very functional body. On top of that, we're finding excellent autofocus, great video capabilities, great photo capabilities. We've got real serious contender here for the most well-rounded camera of 2025. The price on this camera, I mean, considering inflation, it's exactly where it's supposed to be. It's going to be a very similar price to the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. I know these aren't super affordable cameras, but they're not pro top-of-the-line cameras either. And so for anybody who's looking to do some professional work or just a really high-end enthusiast photographer, this could be a fantastic choice. I also think it's important to point this out. I mean, it's been a long time coming since the A7 IV, and back in that time, Sony as a brand was really seen as having the forefront of sensor technology, gold standard for autofocus, great video capabilities, and we have seen now in the last few years the other companies really catching up to the point where now autofocus, I think they all do a really good job. I mean, Nikon and Canon have gone through such big lengths to make their autofocusing effectively as good as the Sony, and video has also caught up in a huge way. So what does this have? It's incredibly well-rounded. It does have maybe the best image quality out of all four. I really want to test that and see further on, but I feel like it just makes the whole market really exciting and really competitive, and you're looking at your first mid-range to high-end camera, this might be a really solid choice. But I await your feedback. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We always love to hear that. We are going to talk about this camera and the others on the PetaPixel podcast, this exact same channel, or all your favorite podcasting apps. Do also consider getting a PetaPixel.com membership. That really helps us out. You can peruse the website free of ads. You can download sample galleries, RAW files, JPEGs, and look at things for yourself, as well as getting great discounts on a whole bunch of different websites. Thanks for joining us, guys. We really appreciate it. We'll see you soon, and pay attention because we might do a comparison video of all the big mid-range cameras shortly.